Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, March 28th, 2013. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. This week, Jason Cody, president of Colorado Malting Company, joins us to talk about his company's progression from family farm to a growing producer of craft malts. Jason also answers your questions from Twitter and Facebook. If you're new to home brewing, would like to get into the hobby for the first time, check out our website, basicbrewing.com, where you can find archives of our audio and video podcasts and our DVDs to walk you through basic and more advanced brewing techniques. You can follow me on Twitter. My username is Basic Brewing, all one word. Also, you can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/basicbrewing.james, and our show page on Facebook is at facebook.com/basicbrewing. Thanks again to everybody clicking on the Amazon.com associate link on our basicbrewing.com site. You know how it works. Whenever you think of shopping on Amazon, go to our website first, basicbrewing.com. Click on our Amazon ad. That will take you back to Amazon. And then whatever you buy there, there's a little thing in the background that I don't understand it, but it works invisibly, and then it tracks what you purchase, and then we'll get a hunk of that. So we greatly appreciate everybody who does that. It doesn't cost you any extra, and you'll be helping us out. We also have associate links for Brew Your Own magazine and the American Homebrewers Association on our site, too. You can find our Basic Brewing iPhone app on iTunes and our Android app on Amazon.com. We're on the BlackBerry Podcast Directory, and we're on the Stitcher app as well. Check out our Brewer's Logbook at basicbrewingshop.com. In the front is a calendar that you can use to track your fermentations and plan your brews. And the good thing about the calendar is that it is blank. So you have a full year of calendar pages no matter when you start your brewing year. And there's room in the back to log the details of up to 50 batches of brew. And finally, if you want to put a tip in our tip jar, some coinage in our guitar case, you can go to basicbrewing.com/support, and thanks very much to everybody who has done so already. Steve and I have been working up some Basic Brewing video episodes recently. I posted one this past week where we tasted our small batch Simcoe Pale Ale, and we brewed the next beer in our small batch line of things. It is a mole beer based on suggestions from brewer Andy Coates, whom you've heard on this show recently. I have high hopes for that beer. And the BBV that I plan on posting this week features a tasting of the second molasses beer that Steve and I brewed and a candied bacon pizza that Steve whipped up from scratch. And that, oh my God, that was an amazing day. You can find those on our Basic Brewing video podcast feed on iTunes and on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/basicbrewing. I want to get to the interview, but first I want to acknowledge those of you who wrote to say that I was probably too cautious in my approach to interviewing Sean Halstead of Mr. Beer last episode. The comments went along the lines of this from John. John says he has a criticism. He says, "Please stop apologizing about Mr. Beer. I brewed all grain years ago and came back to brewing with Mr. Beer because it's easy and I wanted a good home brew. In fact, the dry Irish stout I brewed is great. If people have an attitude about Mr. Beer, well, that's their problem, their snobbery. But I really think you don't need to lower yourself to apologizing to any snobs in your audience." Well, there you go. That was that was probably the most to the point of the emails that I got. But anyway, whatever you want to brew, and you know, if you like what you brew, that's the point. I want to produce episodes on this podcast that appeal to all levels of home brewers, whether you're just getting started or, been brewing for decades. And I do hear from those two. They've been brewing for like 20 years, and they listen to the show. There's plenty of stuff on this podcast and then the archives to make everybody happy. So can't we all get along? Today's interview should appeal to beginners and advanced brewers alike. The story of Jason Cody's family and their business is a fun one. It was a lot of fun to talk to Jason. Thanks to the thriving craft beer industry in Colorado, the Cody family has been able to take their farm to the next level. Well, Jason Cody, welcome to Basic Brewing Radio.
Well, thanks so much.
You are the president of as I understand it, a small family-run operation. Is that right?
That's correct.
Now, talk to me about the history of your company, Colorado Malting Company. How did you come into being and why?
Well, we started off, my family has always grown two-row malt barley for Coors. And that's been something that's been happening in the Cody family down here in Alamosa for the last 48 years. And so we were, I guess dare to say, experts on growing malting barley for someone else to process, in the next steps there. So we decided we would look into what it would require of us to add some value to barley by taking it through some other processes out here on the farm. So we looked into that, and one of our friends had worked at Coors in the malt lab for 16 years. So he was able to give us some data there. And one of his friends had been at Coors for 36 years in upper level executive stuff with Coors Brewing Company in Golden. So he was a lot of help too. So basically between the two of them, we got started understanding malting really well, and then got into converting our old dairy barn. We used to milk cows out here at what was called Cody's Dairy. We had cows here till 1995. And we decided at one point to utilize some of the old dairy stainless steel equipment that hadn't been being used since we sold those cows. And then we renovated the dairy barn and started the process of turning one of those dairy tanks into a malting vessel, if you will. Just from the knowledge that we were able to attain from the two individuals I mentioned. And with some R&D, some extensive R&D, we created a little malt tank that would make about 500 pounds of base malt, diastatic base malt, for brewing. And of course, we weren't able to malt any barley that we had grown for Coors, so we did have some other varieties of grain. Coors owns those varieties that we used to malt for them. Huh. So we had some other varieties that we'd grown ourselves, some craft barley, some scarlet barley. And so we started messing around trying to malt. And the first batch that we made towards the end of 2008 was an experiment, but it seemed to go really well. So we took it into the local San Luis Valley Brewing Company here in the San Luis Valley in Alamosa, and asked Scott and Angie if they wanted to give it a shot. And so they said sure, and they brewed a batch of beer with it, and their extracts were really good, their flavors were great, their fermentations went really well. So they said, hey, would you make us some more? And we said, yeah, sure. So we made another batch, and then pretty soon, as you'd expect, the word got out, and we were running that little dairy tank 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and selling all that malt. At that point, we decided we better, structure things a little bit as far as the business was concerned, and we did that. And then we started designing a unimalt system that would malt about 4,500 pounds of base malt at a time. So we built one of those in the room right next to where this little tank was. We renovated that room and built a big univessel malting tank our tanks, they steep and germinate and kiln all in the same tank. So we designed that tank ourselves. We designed the kilns ourselves. We designed the airflow systems ourselves. We designed the screens ourselves, and we designed all the stirring equipment ourselves, as well as the loading and unloading operations are all unique to Colorado Malting Company. We did all that ourselves. So wow. It's been quite a project.
Yeah, no kidding. Now, yeah. In the agribusiness world, this is vertical integration.
Correct. Yeah, that's right. That's value-added ag is the phrase that we use.
Right.
Yep. Right.
So you're taking that raw material and you're adding value. You're taking more profit. So,
Right.
I mean, was it? I guess you were still growing for Coors while you were working out the kinks in your process. So I guess it wasn't like you were jumping off the ship into the water learning to swim, right? Or
Yeah, that's right. I think the last year we had a Coors contract was in 2008. So it was kind of, we didn't sign a Coors contract in 2009, at least for what we were doing here at home, because we just needed the barley that we could grow for ourselves. So it happened pretty quick, but you're right. We didn't put ourselves in dire straits or anything like that.
so, what's your equipment look like? I mean, if someone's not familiar with the malting process, how do you malt barley in a dairy tank?
Well, you have to provide a way for the air to move through the grain, and keep the grain at, let's say, whatever specification you would want it at, depending on the process that you're involved in. So, it just looks basically like a dairy tank looked for the milk, except we have a false floor in the bottom of it, and we have our ways of moving the air through that grain correctly, and the right amount of air, the right CFM, depending on the operation through there. So, yeah, it really doesn't look much different than it did, except it has some air, what you call like an air plenum, or a way to move the air. Yeah.
So essentially, are you flooding the grain, and then it's malted barley starts out as barley seed. Are you
Right.
are you flooding the grain and then draining it, and then flooding and draining, or how does that process work?
Yeah, sure. When you're steeping, you just soak the kernels in water, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yep. And then you have to make sure that you hit your desired moisture percentages, and that's really where the science comes into the malting process, and where everybody's systems are a little different, depending on what moisture percentage they're hitting, and there's so many variables with relative humidity outside, with the fresh air that you're bringing in, and your unique variety of grain that you're trying to malt, and the temperature that you're using in steeps and germinations, and the moisture percentages you're trying to hit. All those variables kind of come into what your unique process looks like, and then the quality is a direct result of the steep. A lot of people think that the tricky part's the germination, and it has its own problems, as we'll probably talk about. But the steeping is really what makes a difference, and really where you have to be really careful and scientific about what you do in those first stages of the malting process. Yep.
Well, it's good you had experts to help you out on that process.
Yeah, and in fact they're both with us still, and so we still have those resources available to us all the time. Dave Thomas, who is with Coors for 36 years, serves as our malting advisor still, and him and Bob Wall, who's one of the owners of the company too. They both serve for quality with us, and monitor everything we do, and they're always available if we have questions. And we had lots of questions off the start, but now we're getting pretty good at it ourselves. So yeah.
Now, there's some snarky homebrewers out there who are making jokes like, that they're glad that you're diverting grain away from Coors, but I won't go there.
Yeah. What do you think they mean? Though we can go there if you want to.
Oh, beer that is best enjoyed at something other than freezing temperature is probably a better home for your grain.
I get it. Okay. Yeah. The truth is up at Coors at AC Golden, where they make Colorado Native and Blue Moon and those kinds of beers. We have lots of friends up there now, so we get to wrestle back and forth with them and joke around all the time. So Yeah, it's always fun.
Well, and maybe you'll have some influence on them.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, they've talked to us a number of times about buying products from us, for their small lines of beers, not like Coors and Coors Original or even Coors Light or anything like that, but they're smaller. They kind of have a microbrewery inside the Coors brewery, actually, where they make some special beers, and they've talked to us just recently about purchasing malted wheat from us and raw wheat, white wheat. So yeah, they're just as excited about our existing as any of the craft brewers are.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I asked on Twitter and Facebook out there for questions, and the one question that I'm picking out first is kind of a ringer. Simon Cook from Kakariki Brewing Company in New Zealand says, have you ever considered or attempted to malt anything other than usual barley, wheat, rye, etc.?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, this beer I'm sipping on right now is made with malted teff and malted buckwheat and malted red proso millet. And so we have branched out like crazy, trying to malt some experimental malts and malting non-cereal gluten-free grains. And obviously the gluten-free part has been the motivator in why we would do that. Early on in our malting endeavors, into our second year, we got contacted by New Belgium Brewing Company in Fort Collins about doing test malts on gluten-free grains. So, of course, getting a chance to work with New Belgium was a real feather in our hat, and so we said absolutely, we'd love to. Tell us what to do, what you want us to malt. So we started with that project with 5 different grains. We did a millet and sorghum and teff and buckwheat and a grain called koik seed out of Malaysia. And that grain was the only one that wasn't successful. The seed that they sourced for us and then had delivered here, that seed didn't sprout. The koik seed didn't sprout at all. But we were successful malting the other ones I mentioned. And then New Belgium, then we took our results up to them and met with the master brewer there and visited about that project. And then they did use some of those grains to make some pilot brews there in Fort Collins. So that's what got us into it. Directly on the heels of that, though, we were contacted by the Colorado Department of Agriculture here and asked if we would be interested in being involved in a marketing test and a way that they were helping the craft brewers get their hands on other grains. So they gave us a grant to modify that original tank that we started with. We modified that tank over to be able to make malted grains that were gluten-free, like millet and things like that. Those modifications were smaller screen sizes, some different airflow dynamics, which we used that grant money to do. And then we were able to malt millet. So we malted 3 different types of millet on that project: German millet, German prairie millet, a red prairie millet, and a white proso millet on that project. And then after we malted it, we distributed it around the state to microbreweries for free, 25-pound samples of whatever they wanted. So we've also done some malting of sunflowers. Also along the gluten-free line, because gluten-free sunflowers are gluten-free naturally, and so we were able to do that. We've malted black oilseed sunflowers, and we've malted a confection sunflower seed. So both of those seeds went out to different test brews. I did try some of the beer made with sunflowers, and what we heard back about those was mostly their value was in the head retention in the beer. So, even with barley and wheat-based beers, they need some malts to help with head retention. So in the gluten-free beers, it was also a need, and the proteins in the sunflowers seem to be helping with head retention in gluten-free beer.
Now, this is what brought me in touch with you guys, because a listener, AC Albert, out in Colorado, was generous enough to send me a pound of malted sunflower seeds, which I have right here in my hands. And he also sent me a beer that is made with your two-row, 10 pounds of your two-row, and a pound of the sunflower malt, along with Centennial hops and wild Colorado hops and backyard hops from Colorado. So he calls it as Colorado Locavore Ale. So I'm anxious to try this.
Yeah.
So I mean, how do you brew with sunflower seeds? I mean, do you got these big husks, the shells, which you would think would help with lautering in the mash tun. But do you just run those through the grain mill just like regular barley?
Yeah, our suggestions to the guys that have used them are to try to mill those separately from the rest of your grist, just to that you don't break up those shells too much. Because you're right, I think they do have a value in lautering to help the filtration of the beer there in the lauter tun. But if you mill them too fine, they could cause other problems. So it's nice to crack those things and get those seeds out and available for extraction. But at the same time, keep those shells intact as much as you can, because they will build a better filtration bed the larger they are.
Boy, the head on this beer is brilliant. Brilliantly white and really fluffy. I don't know how much that has to do with the sunflower seeds, but it's a really clear beer, and oh my gosh, it smells great. But would sunflower seeds have enough diastatic power to convert on their own?
They really won't. One thing we haven't done with the sunflower seeds is really spend a lot of money in the lab yet. And we've let our brewers know that have purchased the seeds from us that we don't have the volume with the malted sunflowers yet to really get serious about doing malt analysis on those seeds. So I don't know or have any exact diastatic power numbers for you on the sunflower seeds yet, just because the times that we've done that has just been such small scale that we would have lost money on both the malting projects if we just send them off for analysis. So, and it's a specialty thing still, but our experience and knowledge about malted any non-cereal grain is that they really weren't made to make beer with. So, what you find out is that your enzyme levels in all of those gluten-free non-cereals are really low. And there isn't a big potential for, extra enzymes or diastatic power for converting other starches into mash. No, there's really not.
Well, the reason I asked is I've made 100% wheat beers and 100% rye beer, and those converted on their own. And I was just curious if I should waste my risk wasting my pound of sunflower seeds, trying to mash it on its own. But I may have to make a small batch with a pound of two-row and a pound of sunflower seeds just to see what comes out. Man, this is an amazing beer, AC. Woo, man.
Oh, cool. Nice work, huh?
It's all about the hops, but it's got a great malt backbone as well, so...
Wow.
Really good. Really good.
I wish I was there with you so I could try it.
Yeah, you should be jealous. Well, let's go to some more questions. Phil's Brewing says, I see you have raw barley products. Is that seed barley, or would a brewer, or what would a brewer do with raw barley?
Oh, that's a good question. The guys that are buying raw barley from us right now are either planting it in small plots because they want to grow some barley, and it is seed barley, that's right. Also, there's a number of home brewers that purchase raw barley from us to malt because they like to malt themselves. And so that's an easy and inexpensive way to get a hold of some malt. We'll sell the barley in pretty much any quantity. So we'll send out 5-pound, 10-pound, 20-pound, 50-pound bags of raw barley that's been germ tested and is guaranteed to sprout. And guys are able to use that at home in their home malting systems or whatever they have going, to play around. Also, though, we did have, I think we sent, and I'd have to look to be sure, but over 4,000 pounds, and I think it may have even been close to 10,000 pounds of raw barley up to New Belgium one time for a Belgian-style beer that Peter was doing up there. And they they had a way of using that raw barley in the beer itself. So, and I'm not sure what style that was now that I think back on that. It's been years ago. So, but yeah, they had a beer recipe that called for raw barley, and they bought raw barley from us for that. So
cool.
Yeah, lots of things you can do with it.
Well, Travis Wasson asks about tips, tricks, or resources for home malting. And I know you don't want to go into the whole how-to in the short period of time that we have, but
Sure.
Where would you point someone who's interested in learning more about home malting?
The resources are pretty slim right now as far as, any books I could suggest or anything like that. I would, however, just say to Travis to, jump on our website at www.coloradomaltingcompany.com and fill out the contact page, because one of the things we don't believe in as far as our company is concerned here at the Malting Company is big business kind of relationships. We don't like, making people feel like they're a number or just an account number to us. So we're really, really open with what we do. We try our best to help guys out individually. So even though we get lots and lots of emails every day, we have people here that we've got working for us that are members of the Cody family that know their malt, know their beer, and like to help guys. So if he just jumps on the website, we can help him out with any questions he has about malting at home.
I looked around on YouTube and found some videos on home malting, and I was able to malt half a pound or so of barley seed. That's been a year or two ago, and on a small scale, at least, it's pretty simple.
It sure is.
So it's just letting the seeds do what they're designed to do, I guess.
Right.
Torin Ford asks, "Where's the organic products?"
Good question. Originally, we thought organic products would come along as far as demand is concerned right away. In fact, we were kind of bracing for that, looking into our farm here, where the malt house sits on the corner of the barley field, is not a certified organic farm in the state of Colorado, but we do work with growers that have certified organic farms, and I can source organic ingredients at any time. But I have never had the malt house post-harvest organic certified. In fact, I have the paperwork on my desk still. It sits here all the time, and I just haven't had time to do that. But the reason that I haven't, that it sits around, the paperwork, is because we haven't had a demand in the brewing world for a lot of organic malts. I know that a lot of companies offer organic malts, and we here in Colorado haven't seen a big demand for that yet. There are some breweries in Colorado that do only organic beers, but we're still focused on taking care of what we're going to sell the majority of, just because that's what we need to do to keep the doors open. So the demand just hasn't been there yet for large volumes of organic malts.
And there are some hoops that you gotta go through to get certified. I mean, you can't, as I understand it, you've got to ensure that there's no residue of non-organic product in your product that you're labeling as organic, right?
That's exactly right. Yep, you have to make sure you can clean down completely, which isn't a problem here. But that's kind of the process that they look at. They make sure you can clean down all your surfaces and stuff, so you don't cross-contaminate organic with non-organic.
Yeah, a lot of people think that the organic label on a product is just kind of a marketing tag, but there is certification. I mean, there's real real regulations that you got to follow to put that label on your product. So,
yep, that's really true.
Rick Hagerbaumer, who is a brewer out there and is also on Big Foamy Head, the podcast, says he just wants to say thanks. He says they do a homebrew club group buy from you guys at least once a year. And then AC Albert, who brewed the beer that I'm really enjoying right now, says tell you thanks again. Wow. So you got some fans out there.
Cool. Appreciate that, guys.
From Twitter, Ben Helms asks, when you're shopping for malt, how do you discern good malt from bad? So, how can you, if you're looking at the grain bin at the homebrew store, how can you tell what's good?
Now, see, there's a great question, and I can help you with that, Ben. What you want to do is really look at color variation. So one of the things that a lot of maltsters are really good at is blending. In fact, one person said that the good maltster is a master blender. And what I mean by that is you make a different product in your roaster or in your smoker or whatever you're doing to your malts. And then if it doesn't come out to be the right color, well, then you just go get some lighter stuff and blend in with it so it hits the right color. So, and truth be known, in malting, sometimes that has to happen. But what you can really tell a good malt from a blended malt just by holding that like a 50-60 crystal in your hand and looking, are all the colors uniform and the same in those kernels, or is one kernel white and the next kernel very black, so that the average is a 50-60 lovey. What we try to do with our roaster here, and we're just doing crystals and caramels on very small scale still, but we have started doing them. I have a little bit of Colorado Munich available now, and I have a Colorado crystal malt available right now, but it's very small scale and it's still very expensive. But what we try to do is not sell malts that are blended on our crystals and our caramels. And those kinds of malts. We want to sell a uniform malt. The best malts are uniform malts. You're getting that color from every kernel, not a dark and a light mixed together. So that's one way. Another way is to search the quantity that you're looking at for fine or small kernels, especially in your base malts now, kind of away from the specialty malts and over to the base malts. Look at those kernels in your hand. Are they all big, plump kernels? Or are there small fines, what we'd call fines, or small kernels mixed in with those plump kernels? Because you're not going to get the same kind of extraction and brewing value out of those skinny kernels as you will out of the plump kernels. Now, our cleaner is set up to where some guys tell us we're wasting too much malt because we're letting those fines go away, and we're just selling plump kernels. You can look at any of those bags that come out of our malt house. They're just full of plump kernels, and it costs me money to do it, but guys get better results. So there's two ways, at least, that we could cover now that you can tell a good malt from a normal malt.
So Mark Griffin asks about freshness. Can you talk a little bit about proper home storage and freshness and how that affects brews, and also how can you tell if your grain is fresh to begin with?
Sure. The best thing as far as storage or freshness of grain when it comes to malt is really just what the percentage of moisture is in the kernel. We kiln all of our malts down to less than 5% moisture, and that's really where you want that malt to be in order to get good extraction from that malt, good flavor, and all your malty tastes that you're looking for. If the moisture in those kernels climbs up above 5%, you start to lose some of that. So the idea is to keep it in a cool, dry place where you're not going to have it subjected to a lot of humidity. You kind of have to think about the malt like a sponge. It's really, really, really dry. So it's going to be absorbing the moisture and the air around it all the time. Out here in Colorado, we're kind of spoiled because we don't have a lot of humidity. So you can leave it sit anywhere and you won't have any trouble. But other climates around the country and around the world, they really have a lot of humidity all the time, and you have to keep that thing in a sealed container. If you have a dehumidifier in the room, that's a good idea too if you're planning on keeping it a long time. Another tip is not to mill it until you're ready to use it, just like you would a high quality coffee or something like that. Wait until you're ready to brew that thing before you mill that grain, because once you mill it, you expose more surface area to the absorption of the moisture.
These questions are playing right into the conversation. Aaron Winey asks, I'm curious how long crushed grain can be stored before it negatively affects the finished beer.
That has to do with the climate, but I would say longer than you'd think. Shelf life in a high humidity area for a crushed malt, I wouldn't recommend keeping the grain over 3 months once you've milled it. Whereas a whole kernel malt that you haven't milled, to keep a year. So it's gonna affect it after 3 months. After you've milled it, I wouldn't want to brew with it after a 3 month period. But you'd be surprised how, if you do that, and I know from experience that the grain will still extract well. It'll still produce the flavors. But I do think you start to lose some of those finer points after about 3 months of it being milled.
That's longer than I would have thought.
Yeah. And I think maybe you gain some different nodes or something just by crushing that right before you use it, but it'll still perform well months later. Yeah, it's surprising.
Klaus Markstrom asks, is there some malt which you think deserves more attention from homebrewers?
Attention in what way, do you know?
Well, one that's underutilized, you think. Is there something out there maybe that's new that people don't know about that you think would be good to brew with?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do, actually. And that, I would say, your Belgian-style malts. One of the products that we've come up with here in the last year or so, and that's really caught on with like Oscar Blues and the Wynkoop Brewery up in Denver, and that Sun King out in Indianapolis has been a supporter of this malt as well, is the our Belgian style pale malt, and a lot of companies offer good Belgian style malts and even some Belgian style pales. And the reason that I think it's maybe a little underappreciated around the brewing communities is because people don't know exactly what processes are different when you're making a Belgian style pale malt. And what we do to that is we really increase the heat in the kiln earlier than we normally would, and we allow some of that moisture to be recycled in the kilning process. And what that does is it just starts to hint at a little bit of caramelization, which brings out a really nice sweet flavor in the base malt. So what you end up is with a fully fermentable malt, but a malt that still, even though it has all of its enzymatic properties, has some sweeter flavor and some nicer flavors than maybe a standard pale, two-row, or Pilsner malt would have. So I think if there's one to discover, it's to discover these Belgian-style base malts, because they really, you can still get all your fermentability out of them, but they're really going to give you some different flavor characteristics in your beers.
Yeah, it sounds almost like you're talking about the process of making a crystal malt.
Yeah, it's a similar process, right, but done just kind of to the minute scale over onto the base malt. Yep. Jake
Holshoe asks, what does the future hold for micro malting? Is this the next wave in the craft beer movement?
Yeah, wow, good questions. What does the future hold for micro malting? Let's say the sky's the limit. What's happening in our country right now, and I like to brag a little here because I think I saw this coming 3 or 4 years back, and that is that the American beer drinker, consumer, if you will, is starting to realize that it's not all about brand or big company logo, but people are really starting to say, hey, I can show up in Colorado now at a craft brewery and taste the beer, and the beer that I'm tasting has that terroir like they would with wine. Mm-hmm. I'm tasting the region of Colorado. I'm tasting the state itself. And especially now with local malts becoming available and local hops being in fair supply, people are really starting to taste the region. So beer is taking on a new concept kind of in America, and that it's not only about kind of like what brand of beer are you drinking, but now it's starting to become, where did your beer come from, all the way from the malt to the hops and even now to the yeast. So where are these beers from? It's taking on its own regional aspect that's really starting to grow. And with that, we're seeing malt houses pop up all over the United States. We're still the largest ×2 of any craft maltster in the U.S., but that's because we have a great market here in Colorado that other states are still envying a little bit. But there are malt houses popping up everywhere. I get contacts every day on the email from hopeful maltsters all over wanting to start malt houses, and it's just really booming. I think the future of it is just kind of sky's the limit. Let's see what happens. Let's see what kind of weird grains get malted and how they get treated and what kind of awesome styles and beers they come up with and what kind of market demand that makes for new things. And yeah, I just think we've just begun to see a snowball roll that there's no telling how big it's going to get.
And, we talk to craft brewers all the time who the environment is not as competitive as in other industries, in that you see, even in Northwest Arkansas, where small breweries are popping up, you see people kind of collaborating. And, if somebody is short a couple of bags of grain, they'll go across town and borrow some from somebody else. And
right.
So do you see that same kind of atmosphere with the malters, the small maltsters?
Absolutely. It's really amazing how as we all struggle, let's say, and work hard to keep up with demand, we've recently founded the Craft Maltsters Guild, which we have been working on now only for about 3 or 4 months officially. And there's probably a dozen to 2 dozen members in the Craft Maltsters Guild now. So we do collaborate back and forth about data and products and things like that. They're also helping, the Craft Maltsters Guild is helping some new maltsters kind of get started and get their feet wet in this deal in other states. There's also the collaboration it requires when you have multiple industries inquiring product from all of our craft malting companies, because it's not just the beer industry. What we're seeing is a gigantic boom in craft distilling, and that requires different products and people to really take a look at their malts and make sure their malts have a high diastatic power, like you mentioned earlier, and are able to really be helpful to a distillery, and different products like the malted rye and the raw rye that we have now, mostly going to craft distilling, not so much to the brewers yet. So, there's unique issues coming up. And so, people just, I think necessity is the mother of invention, and people hook arms and they figure out how to get it done.
As this beer warms up, along with the hoppiness, I'm getting sort of almost an earthy character from the malt, and I'm wondering if that's from the sunflower seeds or not.
Oh, that's funny. I didn't use that word on purpose when I talked about the sunflowers, to see if you got that in the beer, and I'll be damned if you didn't just say it. So, yeah, the malted sunflowers do have an earthy character to them, and it's almost, that's one tip I would give to anybody brewing with sunflowers is, just don't overdo it. Let the proteins in the sunflowers help with the head retention. Don't put too many sunflowers in, because the earthy thing will come across. Yeah, it really can. But I think that sounds like the brewer you mentioned that did that beer did a pretty good job, huh?
Yeah, AC did a good job. It's a nice 1 pound with 10 pounds. 1 pound of that with 10 pounds of the base malt seems to really be good.
Good mix. Okay.
I almost forgot about our technical question that I told you about in the beginning from the Ukraine.
Yeah.
Logan from the Ukraine is a home brewer over there, and he doesn't have access to malt over there, so he's having to malt his own barley that he gets out of an outdoor feed market, and he's steeping the grain in water until it chits or it starts to root, and then he transfers it into a dresser drawer, and then makes rows to kind of keep things, fairly dried out. But he says that he's having problems the past couple of times he's malted his barley, in that it seems to stall in its growth about 3 days after he puts them into the drawers. They just stop growing and eventually dry out. Says he's tried to jumpstart them with water, but to no avail. At first I thought it was a temperature issue. My apartment is cooler in the winter than in the summer and fall, but everything I've read about malting barley says to keep the grains in a cool environment like a garage to keep the mold away. So does that sound like a familiar problem with the grains stalling out?
I think that we don't have problems with stalling grains here, but stalling germination. In fact, we really haven't ever had that problem. But I think I can glean some wisdom over there on that issue about what might be going on for him, and maybe it can even help him to avoid the issue in the future. So there's two things happening when the grains are growing. Obviously, the starch that the plant has reserved in the endosperm for energy is being converted to a sugar, so the plant can use that sugar as energy to grow. When that process happens, the plant begins to respirate, and it produces CO2. So if you're covering that where you have that grain located, and there isn't enough oxygen getting in, and the air isn't moving a little bit, you can have that grain, the CO2 will eventually just poison the grain, and it'll stop growing.
You're suffocating.
It'll suffocate itself. Yep. And that could be part of what's going on, although if it's in a dresser, I don't know a lot of airtight dressers, so I doubt it's all that. That could be lending to it, though, and slowing the growth. I would suggest making sure that your steeps are done well enough and long enough that your moisture content in the kernel as it's going from your steep into your germination is high enough. I would just suggest to him maybe doing some longer steeps, especially if he's using like a well water or even a city water that the water temperature might be pretty low in, that he might just try taking whatever he's steeping in that first steep and doubling that length of that steep, and then making sure that he gives that grain time to rest, and then maybe doing another long steep and then coming out, and I'll bet you your problem will be solved and that grain will grow until you wish it wouldn't.
Well, I hope that helps. You got to admire brewers like Logan, who finds himself without ingredients and has to manufacture his own, essentially, to homebrew. Yeah. So cheers to Logan for the stick-to-itiveness, I guess, to keep on.
Absolutely. Yep. I think that'll help, Logan. I think if you'll increase those steep times, you'll see that your moisture percentage in the barley kernel will rise. Obviously, it being in the water longer, and that'll help that germination really last longer too. Because if that grain dries out, it'll stop growing. Yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, this has been fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I really appreciate everybody on Facebook and Twitter who sent in questions, because you guys always send in smarter things to say than I could think of my own, and so I hate to take credit for all of it. But and thanks especially to AC Albert over there in Colorado for sending the wonderful beer, and for giving me the idea for getting in touch. Colorado Malting Company. I hope to hear more from you guys in the future, and maybe we can pay you a visit next time we're out that way.
That'd be great. Yeah, you'd always be welcome out here at our malting facility, and see how grassroots this really is, where our buildings are right out here on the farm, and the grain's growing. All you do is look out the window and see the grain growing, and It's pretty cool. So anytime you'd be welcome to come by. Sure.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason.
No problem.
Well, thanks again to Jason and to AC for that wonderful beer. I plan to take my 1 pound of sunflower seeds and follow AC's recipe for a hoppy sunflower pale ale of my own. And I would love to see the operation at Colorado Malting Company one day. One more excuse to visit Colorado and to take part in that beer scene over there. And, by the way, thanks to everybody who wrote in questions again on Facebook and Twitter. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to james@basicbrewing.com or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com. And please don't forget to tell us where you're from. You can check out our new support link where you can throw us a couple of bucks into the tip jar by subscribing financially to our podcasts. We are looking at expanding our coverage, and you can help doing that. Be sure to check out our DVDs, Extract Brewing and Partial Mashing, Stepping into All Grain, Low-Tech Lagering and Decoction Mashing, and Introduction to Wine Kits. You can find them all on our website. We've got combo deals to save you a few bucks if you want to buy more than one DVD at a time, and you can check out our Basic Brewing shirts in the store, too. Our Brewers Logbooks are in the store as well. Keep track of up to 50 batches of beer. You can see a listing of the fine folks across the country who sell our DVDs on basicbrewing.com. And if there isn't a vendor in your area, you can order them online in our online shop at basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody who's continued to click on our Amazon.com link. We appreciate the support there. Our featured products this week that were purchased through the link are Dingo Twist Treat Snacks 50-pack and Game 8000 Derby Duck Brominator. The Brominator. Thanks again, everybody. And remember, I can't if I could do a Daffy Duck voice. I can't do that. I can't tell who bought what, so no worries there. Just click on the Amazon.com logo on a site the next time you feel like Amazon shopping. We greatly appreciate your support. And don't forget, you can also join the American Homebrewers Association and subscribe to Brew Your Own magazine through the associate links on basicbrewing.com. That's all until next time. Until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio, and our website is provided by our buddy Kelly Odson down in Austin, Texas. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. So long.